Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Bass Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It's the 23rd of May, and it's peak locust season.
Yeah. It's really loud. It's gonna get louder.
Well, it's, right now to me it sounds kind of like a ray gun from the 50s, like 50s sci-fi ray gun off in the distance.
Yeah.
I get this thing going on.
Oh yeah, it totally sounds like there's a Star Trek sound, the original series. It's like the searching noise that from Spock's station, I think. Yeah. It kind of is definitely remnant of that. Cicada season definitely sounds like another planet for sure. I definitely, you almost miss it at first, and then halfway through the season, once, there's millions of cicada bodies lying everywhere and they've been flying into your face, then you're sick of them. But it's weird how 17 years of not having cicadas, you're like, oh, I miss the cicadas. But
yeah, I think conceptually I miss them.
Right, yeah.
Like right until that moment when the it's really just started. It hasn't even really hit. We're not even at the full peak of where that happens for like, in waves for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a set of earplugs just for that.
Yeah.
I'm not messing around.
Like noise canceling headphones are definitely gonna.
Oh, I just got some that do like, 39 decibels of NPR or NRP, whatever the rating is. Like these are not filters.
Mm-hmm.
These are like
canceling,
straight up just nullify incoming signal.
Yeah.
They're silicone. They got the flanges. They're actually pretty comfortable. I tried them out one night. I woke up in the middle of the night and I forgot where I was because I couldn't hear anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's actually really amusing or interesting to me how much we auto-locate or we echolocate even without realizing it, and how we realize how close a wall is.
Right. Like the shadows sound of a room is what we're also using to echolocate. Like there are shadows of sound just as the way there's shadows of light. And it's like little pockets of intersecting sound waves that come up with like unique identities, but then as we become accustomed to a space, those little sound shadows become how we map it. And it's like interesting to see people take that shit for granted, in that I like haven't taken a shower in 100% light in years, and I use the sound to echolocate the process. Just especially like you never know when you might lose a sense, but I've been using, like I said, the shower as a sort of controlled but semi-dangerous means of training my acute hearing to be better. In that, I think.
Well, it's interesting to me because you're training yourself to hear comb filtering,
right?
And knowing that it's comb filtering is really only useful in like an audio engineering or a acoustician engineering type of field. But what's always fascinated me about like just comb filtering in general is, when we're listening to sound, we take for granted that most instruments are recorded in pretty nice conditions or more or less ideal conditions. And even when they're recorded in what might be thought of as less than ideal conditions, I'm willing to wager that the engineer like did everything they could to make that room work like to their advantage. And that's what audio engineers do. And so, it's always fun, I think, to consider the environment. And then, of course, once you are aware of what it sounds like when you're a foot away from a wall, or 2 feet away from a wall, or 3 or 4, even further, these things start to become really interesting.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when they get up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night or something, echolocate and on instinct, and they don't even necessarily turn on all the lights just because that shit hurts. But I think it's definitely something that if more people actively tried to work that muscle, they'd be more inclined to get in tune with their environments. Because like, yeah, I can tell if there's a hawk outside because of how the birds start tweeting, or how the chipmunks start chirping. Like, I've gotten so accustomed to my space that I can tell stuff over a distance way outside of my apartment just by listening to how things are interacting with the space in my apartment. And that's kind of where there is a benefit to having that level of awareness for one's own space. But I don't, like, people aren't that in tune with their own shit in general.
Yeah. Late at night, I find myself I installed a bunch of LEDs around the house, and can turn them down and set the mood lighting just right. But later, as it gets later at night, I tend to go like more and more red until the end of the night, when it's basically just red light turned down to as low as I can get it. And at those like final moments before I'm ready to call it a night and go to sleep, I feel like I can see everything in the room just fine. Like there's no real, I'm not doing anything that would require, visual acuity at that point. But I can see everything. And then when I leave that space and I go into a room that has no light, it's not a hard transition. And what little ambient light is available through the windows is sufficient. It's really nice. Like sometimes when I'm driving, I wonder, do we really need these super bright lights?
Right. If we didn't have so much light pollution, we wouldn't.
Yeah.
The moon would be enough.
Because my ancient ass...
I guess on cloudy nights, but...
Yeah. My old ass truck has really old lens system and lights, and even when I put new light bulbs in it, they're still yellow and low output. And I'm sure they were a little bit brighter when they were brand new, but they couldn't be much brighter because the bulbs are brand new. Mm-hmm. And so it's just whatever kind of degradation has occurred to the exterior of the lens assembly, and maybe whatever water or buildup is built up on the inside over the course of 26 years. That's a long time. But it can't be that much brighter. And so I'm wondering, and I know that headlights on cars have gotten brighter over the course of the last 25 years.
They had to make a law against the brightness at some point.
Yeah.
It got too bright.
It got too bright, and they had to start imposing height restrictions on how high lights could actually be.
Yeah.
That stuff's pretty insane. But I think there's got to be some kind of like neutral balance where it doesn't... where night vision can actually be a useful and functional asset. Because when I'm driving around late at night, if it's not all street lights and everything, it's sufficiently, there's enough light to see. Mm-hmm. With just some low beams and some not eye-killing bright headlights. I know I'm complaining about headlights, and I like headlights because they do illuminate the road and they help you see. But I think that there's like a diminishing return with, completely flooding the space in front of me. And what is that actually doing to my eyes?
Right. Yeah. The difference in depth of field that your eyes are having to adjust for, it's probably twice as tiring when you're looking at the real objects being lit up instead of looking at a screen that's flattening the image. Mainly it would be difficult to transition to cameras when other people are using headlights, because then the beams are going to blind the cameras briefly if they're facing each other. So that's kind of where
So I remember Mercedes, it was like 10, 15 years ago. They debuted this infrared system, and they were able to avoid even deer walking onto roads.
Right.
And so maybe they don't need to see visible light, or maybe visible light isn't even an issue.
But it's not 100% accurate because it can have false positives, which is why you need cameras and infrared. You can't have one or the other. Yeah, they'd
have to have a true diverse.
Yeah. This is the argument that they have, which is why you hear Elon Musk talking about the laser's not good, cameras are better, blah blah blah. But it's you need both. You can't just do one or the other.
We could add radar to the actual list,
Right, radar's been on there. Radar is what they do for proximity already.
Yeah.
That's the easiest one, in fact, and that's the one that they add for parking is usually radar, because it's also the cheapest.
So it seems like they got everything they need to make vehicles communicate with each other. It just requires that all of these vehicles speak the same language then.
Right, which requires all these companies agreeing to do that, which they're not going to do.
So that would be like,
Which is why
that's what the government has to step in.
Which they're not going to do either.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand it. And this is also the same problem with batteries, which is why we can't just go to a quote-unquote gas station and switch out batteries, because they haven't agreed upon a battery standard. Because there's no real incentive to agree upon a battery standard and no outside pressure, it's not. They are trying to adopt a user-based pump model where you fill up your battery instead of just switching it out like a propane tank, because people are accustomed to the gas station approach. So it's easy to pull it off, but really it's kind of like just a way around having to unify the battery type to make it easier for the actual customer.
So if the battery and drive system and wheels and steering mechanisms, all that was just one piece, and then the cabin and trunk and frunk were all like a cartridge that you just kind of plugged in.
I mean,
you just lift it off with, like, you'd pull in, it would clamp down under the vehicle, lift it off the thing, the undercarriage would roll off, a new one would roll in, sit it down.
It's easier to just switch out the battery. That's like over engineering. When you can just switch out the battery. Like, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, it's the way that they've over engineered these things so that you can't just switch out a battery.
Well, yeah, my understanding with the Tesla is that you either have to remove the front end or you have to remove the back end or the rear end to slide the battery out of the tray. Way
they engineered it. It's not the only way they could have done it. They could have done it so that you can just switch out a battery.
Well, Neo made it so they could switch out a battery like a cartridge, like an old Nintendo cartridge. I mean, a 1,000-pound Nintendo cartridge.
Same thing with oil changes, because like the way that military vehicles have to work, they have to be able to be maintained quickly. So you can't have something breaking down and not being able to like change the oil in less than 5 minutes. So they have modular cartridge-based shit like that, but we don't get it because we don't demand it from. Like, capitalism is never going to give you something that lets you do it on your own. You have to force capitalism to do that. You can't do that with money. It's the biggest paradox of this system is like, it will never sell you a means to become self-sufficient and independent from it, in that's why it's like, oh, we'll give you an electric car, but you have to go to our filling station.
Even my my eventually ancient 26-year-old truck, I ran into my first, holy crap, am I not going to be able to find this part moment? And I was looking for this little spacer, basically a giant washer, and I couldn't find it. And then I did a bunch of roundabout searches and eventually found the part number. And then I found the part available, like, it was available. And I'm not sure if it's shipped or not. I bet the listing is from a place where they're going to order it from someone else.
Right.
And they're just going to have it shipped to me like a
drop ship. Middlemen, man.
That's where we are still.
Yeah. Those people, their existence is based on finding somebody who's in need and finding the thing and keeping that gulf between those two.
My favorite online parts supplier didn't have this part. I had to get it from a vendor on Amazon, and they didn't even have this thing listed in a way that it could be found unless you knew the part number before you went looking for it. I knew what the part was called in the Haynes manual, which is what I'm pretty sure most people in my situation would be working with. I doubt that somebody who's trying to keep their old ass truck alive and isn't a mechanic, I doubt that they know the part number or even have the manual that includes the part number in it. If that manual exists, I want to know about it because I probably need it at this point if I'm going to be looking for obscure washers and spacers.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about modularity on the drive over here and how everything needs to be more modular. And it's like, oh, it sounds absurd in this current society.
Works for computers.
Right, it does, but these are also the same people that buy a new computer every time they haven't cleaned it out, and then the fucking shit slows down. So instead of cleaning it out, they just buy a new one. That's the people we're dealing with, which is why they like pitching that anti-intellectual population modularity is like lost on them, because they don't behave in a modular manner in the first place, so they're not going to understand the benefits long term of modularity in any capacity. And it's like, oh, I'll just get a new car instead of replacing a part, or oh, you can replace the hood or the skirt or the side flares, or the trunk. You can add a spoiler. There's all these things you can
probably
do.
buy a brand new floor plan for almost any vehicle if you really want to go that car,
and refit the body. You can do that with with most vehicles, in the sense of it just takes work. But people just buy a whole new car instead of trying to like refit something. And that's where there's no understanding of a modular approach. So that's why the argument is lost on people. Like,
well, I think with cars, it's almost that they're too modular. Like with to do the wheel bearings on that truck, I've got to replace. Well, I don't have to replace. I could theoretically clean the bearings out and repack them, but I know that at least one set of the bearings is fouled.
That's not modular, that's specialized.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Modular is interchangeable.
Oh, okay. So Volkswagen does that then.
Yeah.
And Volkswagen has modular assembly lines where they share platforms where when it needs to be a bigger vehicle, they just increase certain dimensions of the thing, but it's
modular.
It's the same platform that they use.
Specialized is like, the 6-star with the gap fucking screw for Apple to open the back of it. That's not modular at all. That's 100% specialized. And then they make it so that it's like brand specific parts. And Ford does it, Honda does it.
I think that like my Ford has I keep reading about compatibility with Wrangler parts and from that era.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of like weird cross compatibility. There's some things that aren't compatible and require modification, but there were some things where it's like, well, this is kind of surreal.
Yeah.
It makes sense when manufacturers have agreements to manufacture vehicles, tire vehicles, or just parts for another company, but not when those companies are definitely not in any kind of agreement.
Right. The specialization comes from deals, not from necessity, and that's the problem. And that's why when people are in a situation where they're like, oh, my computer started being slow and it won't play videos anymore, I guess I need another computer, because they don't understand like the benefits of modularity in any scenario. Then they just go out and they buy new cars, they buy new clothes, people would never patch up their clothes in America.
If GM wasn't actually a financial institution and they were not the financial holding company that signs off on all of the projects that every GM affiliate manufacturer produces, that would almost be a modular situation,
right?
Where these are competing companies that are just using the same parts and the same platforms to build similar, almost identical vehicles. But that we learned
that might have actually been from a mandate, if I'm not mistaken, too, because I'd have to do more research, but I think there might have been something where, because GM had government investment, they might have had to do something along those lines. And like I said, I'd have to research it, but I don't think that's something that in this climate that they just did voluntarily, necessarily, to be like, oh, we're GM, that means we're good men. Like, no. I think somebody had to force them to do that. But the fact that they ended up doing it, still, it's like, well, the end result's the same. So,
yeah. I wonder what the kind of deal they had to make with China, though,
that's part of it, too, is that, okay, so the most American-built car, I think, is 75% made in America, with 25% being constructed in, like, Mexico, with near 100% of the parts coming from China still. So, like, we're just not making parts in America in general for American vehicles. There are some exceptions, but I think the most American car is like 75% built here and near 0% parts built here. But there's like mixes between different vehicles where like some will be, 50% parts made in America, but like 50% built outside of America. Ford, I think, has the most constructed in America vehicle at 75%, if I'm not mistaken.
The Ford Ranger, 2020 Ford Ranger, is the number one made in America vehicle.
And how many does it say percentage? Because this one might be different. Like the last time I looked, it was a couple of years ago, but it's usually Ford because of the way their factories are situated. But even then, they've outsourced like at least 20-25% to Mexico.
Well, it's interesting because the Ford Ranger that we have today was the global truck platform for Ford. It was the one that they were selling internationally.
Well, because even then, Ford does specialized plants. Like my father worked at Ford for 25 years or something like that, and their factory only built drive shaft columns. Like they built drive shaft columns for like 5 different.
Oh
vehicles.
Yeah, so the Ford Ranger has 70% of its parts sourced domestically.
But then, does it say how much of it's built here?
It's built in Wayne, Michigan.
Okay.
And down the street from Dearborn, apparently.
Yeah, many of the engine components came from Mexico, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where they've outsourced a lot of the parts.
Well, that makes sense.
To Mexico.
I think that a truck has to be made like in the market that it's being supporting or supplying. It should be, because then it would then it would reflect the needs of the local consumer base.
Right.
I don't think somebody in Thailand actually needs an F-350. I don't think an F-350 fits on roads outside of this country. And I think that the semis, even in other countries, they're not much wider than the full size trucks we have here, but they're just built differently. They're built for different situations. They've got different transmissions. I don't think they go 100 miles an hour.
No.
I mean, I don't know how fast semis go. I know they go 80 miles an hour. I'm sure they go 100. That'd be silly if they didn't.
Well, they're built for. I mean, I think they could probably get up to 80, 90, 100 if you let it, but it's built for like pulling.
So it looks like Super Shockwave, the fastest semi truck, reached a top speed of 333 miles per hour, and then the original jet truck went 234 miles per hour. The Volvo Iron Knight traveled 171 miles an hour. And the Volvo Mean Green traveled 147 miles. That's insane. Semi-trailer top speeds are in the 113, 115 mile per hour range, maybe more on flat ground, fully loaded, not wise, but can be done. Companies have limiters set for 65 to 70 miles an hour max for insurance reason. Well, that makes sense too. Yeah, so they can go 100 miles an hour. That's plenty fast. And for like the amount of weight that those things carry, that's like way more than sufficient speed. If it was a train, it would be different. I would feel much safer about it because trains are on like schedules where they've been planned out. They know how long it takes to slow down a train. They know if a train's delayed, they can start slowing a train down sooner. They can just communicate these things because trains were like the first internet. They can still probably send signals through them to the trains if they want to. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they can. I think that's like the one steampunk technology that probably deserves to still exist. Like Morse code through train lines.
I mean, if you can send a signal, you can just send a straight up internet.
Well, yeah.
Like you can get.
I mean, isn't the internet just ones and zeros, right, dashes and dots, anyways?
Like you can use an outlet to get internet signal through it.
Yeah, power line.
Yeah, and that's where there's like extenders that will use the electricity.
Oh yeah.
Like the means of connecting to the cable instead of like an actual fiber line, which is like, yeah.
I've seen that. I've never actually used one. I haven't
either, but
I've read about
just know
them.
They exist.
Yeah, I've read about them, and they seem like a really, ingenious idea.
Yeah, a good way of extending the internet without getting more hardware, or more like modem,
without having to run all that Ethernet cable.
Right. Exactly.
As it stands, I've got like 60 feet of like Cat 7 or something like that, Cat 8, like backbone cable running underneath my house. And this was for some reason in anticipation of home network speeds reaching 2 to 6 gigabit per second or something dumb, or 10 gigabit per second. It's never going to happen in here because I doubt we're going to get any of that kind of technology that's going to require physical wire, at least not for the consumer. I think that the consumer will be completely satisfied with like 5 gigabit per second. Like,
I mean, what else do they need? Like 16K video. And that's where we hit this point.
60. Wait, so 16K. We're talking like IMAX.
Right. I know. That's what I'm saying. Because think about it though. What I think we've hit the point of like the maximum needs for consumers based around the capacity for our senses to sense. So there's like, what, we're gonna go to 32K video, fucking 64K. Like, there's no reason, and especially to stream it. So there's this sense of like our internet usage, unless we invent something else, we've exhausted. I mean, not to say that we're gonna stop using it. They have not, no one's come up with anything new or any new ways to use the internet in like 5 years. Yeah.
Well, they've
just been changing different ways.
There's a dot pitch limitation for our eyes over a given distance. Right. And the print industry has known this for years because they can create a photorealistic billboard that you can see for 10 miles and it still looks crystal clear right to the moment that you're like 100 feet away from it. And then it starts to get a little grainy. But there's an actual physical limit to what we can see and what can be produced. And so once the projection size, the LCD pixels themselves become so tiny or so packed in there are real diminishing returns in terms of heat and electrical requirements, storage requirements for the media processing requirements, like all of these things. And I mean, sure, this is like...
So I just thought of a different way to use internet that it's gonna be decades before this is possible. But okay, just imagine this. So you have two people in two different cities, right? In two different green rooms. These people want to have a conversation. You project images of a space into both of these places that is the same place, project their image into each other's space. You're actually getting real close to it's not a teleporter, but it's damn near the closest thing of two people in a different locations sharing the same space. When it's good enough, our senses won't be able to tell the difference. And the issue is not just teleporting the hologram or the image of the person, it's locating them both in the same space. So then when two people are in two green rooms, they're both seeing the exact same fucking room, and their minds will not be able to tell the fucking difference, bro. Like, even if, like, and the crazy shit about it is there's levels to this where you can have a room that morphs, like some sort of room that morphs to projections that's part of the whole system. So this is like the next level of communication. This is the highest level would do this first. Like, this would be president to president, the first people using this, because otherwise there's no reason for two normalized people to use this technology. There's no real reason for anybody to use it. But the issue is, where else can we fucking go with this shit? So this is what I'm saying. This is the only type of shit, like, it has to be something on that level of extrapolating technologies into using them together to actually make the use of the internet any more beneficial. Like, we've exhausted the internet.
I think if a human being can step into a projected or like a hologram of a machine, like a surgical machine, and then control the armatures of the machine like they were using their hands. Right. I think that would be a pretty useful application.
That already exists, but putting that shit all together is what I'm saying.
No, I mean, like, so they put on their AR goggles, so it gives them gives them more telemetry, and then they can stand there and physically be a part of it in a way that instead of wearing goggles or sitting their head or staring at a monitor with a craning their neck, they can actually be in those positions. Because I'm sure there's a lot of muscle memory that is developed over years of surgery. Like, that's
the highest remote
operation.
Do basically what you're talking about, but they're so inaccessible. There's a few of them, but the ones at the highest level do exactly what you're saying. They just are not going to be, like, you can't walk into St. Vincent and see somebody using it. Yeah. Like, it's just going to be like, they're experimental, but they're functional. So they work. They're out there.
I think that would be, in my perception of the way technology works right now, that would actually be a higher priority of development than allowing world leaders to communicate.
Right. Well, and I only say this framing in the fact that already exists. Yeah. It just needs to have more R&D so it's accessible. Like, if that did not exist, that would obviously be way more. But this is what I'm saying. Like, we've hit, like, that exists. It just has to be improved. Like, we've done a whole lot of shit that is actually beneficial. But we're all, like I said, we're like out of beneficial things to do. Like, we just need to do the things now that we've started better in a lot of cases. But it's like, this is where I'm saying, and this is where, I mean, it's like really difficult to find a new use case for the internet because we've damn near done everything you possibly can with the internet as a species. And it's like, nobody's even, I don't think anybody's really thinking of it that way. We're not post-internet, but we're I want to say we're post-internet discovery. Like, there's like nothing new to be discovered on the internet.
I think we're in the, we're not definitely in like a post-discovery phase. We're in a, wait, that's what's actually happening kind of phase, where people are finally starting to read the terms of service or the EULAs or their whatever binding agreement. They just casually checked a box and clicked OK when they signed up for the service. Like,
have you ever watched Legends of Tomorrow?
Oh yeah.
They did an entire episode about terms of service, which is fucking genius. I wish schools would assign this episode because the way they did it, it's so fucking genius. Like, spoilers. Anybody, what's crazy is Legends is this wacky show, and I don't think a lot of people end up watching it because it's so it's so original in what they're trying to do that it's hard to understand even what they're doing. They're making social commentary by using time travel as the lens through which they view current society. So it's kind of hard to like, okay, for example, one of the captains, Sarah Lance, she's bisexual, so she'll travel in the past and like sexually liberate a woman or something, and then the woman will be like, well, you know what, it's kind of too early right now, I gotta go back in the closet. And this will be like what you thought was just a kooky episode or a kooky TV show about time travel. They're like really discussing like, oh, because then there's like an episode about an interracial couple that gets stuck in 1960s or some shit, and it's like, you not the things that they address for being the CW, for being a teenage show or a show for teenagers mainly, you wouldn't think that they do it, and they do it in such an intelligent way that I'm like, bravo to them. But it's fun, and that's kind of where, all that said, the way that they like approach capitalism in America is not really in a positive light. But you really have to like, they're not being negative about it. They're being real about it. And I think that's a fine line to walk when you can acknowledge something is wrong without condemning it, and then be like, oh, here's like the positive outlook you can come away from it with. So I think they just do a really good job about like taking complex issues and then addressing them. There's like Iranian American characters on there.
The thing I like about Legends is that it takes time travel and it doesn't try to make it too complicated. It doesn't try to present you with some kind of continuum where you don't really realize or understand how many times they've gone through this. Like, I want to be real specific about that. Terminator is a continuum. We have no idea how many times that machine has gone back and how many times it's been destroyed. We only know the times that it's succeeded at killing John Connor.
When you're watching perfect time loop stories, you never know. It's the same with Watchmen.
Yeah, like there's this really kind of it's under discussed about these kind of continuum time travel narratives where there's a reason that Skynet is so advanced. There's a reason that technology in the future is so advanced, and it's because they've identified this critical moment where they're trying to really dial it in so they can have, the super technology future. And that's cool. That drives the story and all that stuff. But what Legends succeeds at doing is they utilize time travel as a mechanism to find or to isolate incidents where we can have like learning moments, where it's not cut and dry. It's actually all very gray, but they find a way to explore ethical or moral dilemmas in a way that it's still fun. It's not like, oh god, how much math do I have to do to make sense of this shit?
Right.
And so that's actually I think that's what makes it the most successful like variation on the theme.
Yeah.
There was a TV show called Continuum where it was where they tried to follow a storyline, like a diverted timeline, and then and into a future that was better than the one that the protagonist leaves from. But I kept getting the feelings like, how many times does this happen? If this is actually a continuum story, like how many times does this actually play out?
And they implied that it had been multiple times when there's like that time patrol that has like they have a haul of Kira's or whatever that they caught. So the one we were watching, I think, was like the third one, or she definitely wasn't the first one.
No, she wasn't the first.
So that's where, yeah, like obviously you know it's not one loop, but in the way that they did it, yeah, it's confusing as to how many. But I think that's interesting in a multiverse scenario where this is, I think, what they're about to hit on with Loki.
Yeah.
You can't really, like, the way that this multiverse science has been written, it's like you can potentially cause a split just by thinking something. It doesn't necessarily have to even reflect an action that's taken in physical reality. It can become from a thought. But that's like...
So have you watched MODOK?
No, not yet.
It's like, I think it's like 9 or 10 episodes, and I think it's like Patton Oswalt.
Yeah, he's like one of the most prolific comic book people right now.
Yeah, well, he does this incredible interpretation of MODOK. Quite possibly the most inspired MODOK that I've ever... I never could have imagined this MODOK. Mm-hmm. And I actually felt bad for the guy. Holy crap, I found myself like rooting for MODOK for once in my life. It was so weird.
I forget what comic he's writing, but he's writing a comic series right now. Like, he's one of the few people that's been in the Disney or Marvel and DC universe. He's been in multiple parts in the Marvel universe. He was in Blade 3. He's played multiple parts on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because he plays like triplets or something, or they're clones. That's what it is. So he's played like 4 or 5 characters in the MCU. So yeah, that's where I'm like, man, Patton Oswalt is one of the most prolific comic book people, period. As far as like,
well, you know, there's this moment where he is interacting with his daughter, and he's like, I gave you money to get a camera. And she's like, I did. I got this smartphone. and she's like, check out this filter. And it's like, it shows what people look like if they were puppets. And it shows like Patton Oswalt's face in the MODOK frame. And they're both just like, whoa, like taken aback. And it was this moment. It was just like this moment of clarity where it's like, they've got a really good sense of humor, obviously, because they envision this kind of MODOK. I mean, A+. Yeah. That's how I felt. I was like satisfied in a way that I wasn't expecting, basically.
I feel like MODOK is a hard villain to take seriously.
Well, I think it's the most serious robot chicken that I've ever, most like the deepest, not the darkest, but like the most serious dramatization of anything that I've ever seen Robot Chicken put out. Like that Seth Green group. Because it's definitely got this really hardcore Robot Chicken vibe, but there was only like one moment where it truly went Robot Chicken, and that's like that's the best fight scene in the entire series. Even if it's when Marathon, it becomes this, it becomes a movie basically, but that's like the best fight scene, and it's like the one moment where you can tell it's like, okay, this is like real. This is the like peak Robot Chicken moment. I'm gonna enjoy this, and you will. But it's serious. It's like a really serious stop motion. I was very impressed.
Well, they made him the main villain of the Avengers video game storyline, like of the main first part of the campaign, and it's pretty interesting. So that's where I'm like, I could see the MODOK TV series being interesting, but then also bringing him to live action. If Patton Oswalt played that, I'd watch all that.
Oh yeah,
every single fucking frame of him playing MODOK.
Just his head floating around with tiny arms and tiny legs.
But I feel like a Patton Oswalt MODOK live action would be legit amazing, and that's kind of where, at this point, I know how much he loves comics and how much he would dedicate himself to making that part real. But I also think at this point the character's okay, but I do recognize that some characters benefit from having like a celebrity that has a somewhat recognizable personality, then boosting that character's recognizability in that. Not to say, like, I don't know if Hugh Jackman was really recognizable necessarily even before Wolverine, but when you or like Chris Hemsworth and Thor, he was 100% nobody, but when you have someone who the public can identify with the comic book character and that person really truly embodies them, then it does really well for the comics. And that's kind of where, like, you know, I really hate a lot of comic book movies, but I appreciate what they end up doing for comic book industry in the end, in that the comic book industry would have died if it weren't for like Blade, basically.
So
Blade and Batman.
I think Hugh Jackman was like a soap opera guy.
Oh, he was definitely he was like a seasoned actor.
1, 2, 3, 4.
But he just wasn't known.
5, 6, 7 shows over the course of 4 years, all TV basically.
Yeah.
And then he lands Logan, the role of Logan in X-Men in 2000. And that from there on, his career is like just
Les Mis and shit.
Dude, that's the springboard. And so yeah, I think he was in Happy Feet.
But at the same time, like, Wolverine was a niche character that X-Men, only like really fanboy X-Men fans liked, because he's a little short, fucking stinky Canuck that was rude and had like rejection problems with Jean Grey. He wasn't like a particularly good character. So that's kind of where, before Hugh Jackman, like, you know, I was a fan of Wolverine, but like looking back on him, I'm like, man, Wolverine is a creep. Like, super creep. Creeple team.
In the comics, he's not really that interesting. Like,
no.
He's a brawler. He goes in and cuts things up and kills people. And
it's somebody you like when you're a kid and you're not really, you don't understand complexity.
I think that his character has definitely gone under serious revision over the years, and they've tried to add depth to him. And there's some stories that try to explore, you know, his past, like, or when he goes to Japan. There's that
Sabretooth is the most interesting thing about Wolverine. Right? Think about it.
Yeah. Why can't he leave? Why can't they just get away from each other at this point?
Because that is his biggest heel. Yeah. And he got inside his head. That's the fact that he convinced this dude that he was his father, and then you find out he wasn't his father, and then you're like, well, who the fuck is this dude? And that's like the most interesting thing about Wolverine is like this dude that fucked him up mentally, just completely mind fucked him, beat his ass, and
like
then
over and over again too.
Yeah, multiple times. Just Wolverine just could never best Sabretooth. I mean, I think there was maybe like when he got help, but on one-on-one, Sabretooth had that ass every time. Every time one-on-one.
Yeah, no, Sabretooth is bigger and faster and stronger and meaner. And would
talk shit to him the entire time.
Yeah.
Just,
he regenerates just as quickly. He's still
whooping Wolverine's ass.
Yeah. It's like the difference between a Wolverine and a honey badger.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little bit bigger, a lot meaner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is fucked up because Wolverines chase bear up trees and don't fuck around either, but I watched a video of a honey badger dragging a snake into a bush as like hyenas came up on it and tried to kill the snake too.
Jump him.
And so the honey badger has to like fend off.
Jeez.
Oh man, there are some really crazy animals out there, but none of them are like crazy enough to develop explosives.
Touche.
Dude, like, I know they have a ceasefire, but there was like this incredible stream of imagery coming off of like Twitch of just buildings. Just there's a building here, now it's gone.
Yeah.
Like for city, like blocks and blocks of it. What used to be an entire like community is now a bunch of rubble, like completely flattened.
Human beings are so disappointing. It's like, man, we get out of we're not even out of a pandemic. Y'all can't.
And
so here's the thing. Okay,
well, so this gets even weirder. I see people. I saw this meme going around of like, restore Israel to its rightful people or whatever, and this is like coming from this is from America, where we stole the land from indigenous people.
Oh God, yeah.
So,
jeez.
Meanwhile, China's creating autonomous regions for ethnic minorities and indigenous peoples and letting them like govern themselves and providing them assistance and building roads.
Yeah. But we're acting like that's prison. That's what our media is saying, is like those things are prisons. And it's like, dude, that's not at all. It's our propaganda machine here is insane. So the way they try to make everything China does look bad, it's so fucking crazy.
Our propaganda machine, Falun Gong is paying for Epoch Times. Like,
oh, I mean, yeah, I know that.
They're
but
like,
I'm saying,
they've got to contend with their own anti-propaganda machine.
Yeah.
But like Belt Road Initiative is like building this giant interstate network across all of China and like all throughout Asia and even into parts of Africa. Mm-hmm. Like, it's going to provide and even has developed sea lanes. I think that's another part of it, and like that's just going to increase economic activity across the region. They just need to make sure that these areas are like, hey, if there's going to be a population there, like China built a bunch of cities like overnight practically. Of course, they built it overnight. They can build a hospital in 5 days now. Mm-hmm. So they built a bunch of cities, and everyone West is like, hey, what are they going to do with this replica of Paris? What are they going to do with this replica of Berlin? It's like, well, they're going to move people in there, and then they're going to open up shops, and then there's going to be economic activity.
Right.
Because they're going to be on one of these like critical infrastructure highways on the Belt Road. Yep. Like,
duh. It's like they're planning.
So they're thinking about this stuff.
Amazing how planning and strategy work. You're like, oh, if we build this city and then move people from an overcrowded city into this newly built city, it's going to promote economic activity. Huh, weird.
Well, that's crazy how that works.
Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, this... But this gets back to, again, the notion of, like, the government can't step in and do shit like that if they're not educated enough. And since we've had basically the same government for like the last 50 years, 60 years, they haven't learned anything new. They haven't learned about the internet. They haven't learned about autonomous vehicles. They haven't learned about green initiatives. They just lie and fucking tax. That's all they do on the right and the left. That's all they know how to do. Right knows how to be racist. The left knows how to pretend to care about social justice and take fucking donations and not do shit about it. So it's like, it's crazy to see the lack of movement in America, whereas the most technologically advanced thing that has come out of this country, and we don't even know if it's come out of this country, is the capacity to move numbers. That's it. Is Bitcoin, this is your technological advancement? Cryptocurrencies, moving numbers, that's it? Okay, I guess. I mean...
Man, I mean, kudos to everyone who's making money off of the last round of growth. I just wonder if people realize that money that is invested into cryptocurrency and then lost is like money that's no longer circulating in the economy that actually benefits them.
Yep.
Like it takes away from, like, that money might end up, you know, helping
They don't get
critical
that.
infrastructure or helping resource
They don't get
allocation.
that,
It would help equalize like the infrastructural limitations that we all face. That's, I know I know it sounds like socialism, but it's basically the system that we've got now. We pay taxes, we get our infrastructure maintained, but when there's no money for that because the economic pool is drained and funneled into cryptocurrency, and some fucking whale like pumps the shit, and then they dump their fucking coins, their tokens, and lo and behold, now your coins are worth like 60% of what you thought they were. And granted, you still made a 20% profit, but man,
For what? What good is the profit if you don't spend it on something in the economy, right?
yeah.
And
If
that's what people aren't doing. They're not.
Well, I mean, where can you actually spend Doge? A few places on the internet.
If you know what you're doing, you can spend it anywhere. But that's where they're not even trying to. These people don't care about joy. That's the fucked up part. Is joyless profit. These people are just doing this shit for like the sake of doing it. They don't even take joy in it.
Holy crap. I mean, there are video games where you can pretend to make money.
Of course.
You just want to watch numbers go up and down and look at candlesticks.
Right. But that's what I mean. Like, they're not. You can tell that they're doing it for the sake of doing it because they're not enjoying any profits. None of them are just. It's like epidemic how many of these people just do it and don't actually enjoy themselves.
And it makes sense if you understand the technology and you're backing technology that is meaningful, but Doge was a joke. I mean, and Bitcoin itself it's not actually panning out to what all of the marketing said it was going to be.
Right.
And I mean, Litecoin, is that even being developed anymore? Charlie Lee left that program like 4 years ago. Last I read, he was working on Monero, but I haven't read anything about Monero in years.
Yeah. I mean, because the only thing you can use it for is illicit transactions.
Oh, well, that's not good for anything then.
No. I mean, people who use Monero will say otherwise, but that's a lie.
I don't need to buy a submarine
With Monero, right.
like.
I thought you meant a sandwich, but I mean, like, yeah.
I mean, like an actual
But
submarine.
I'm saying, like, why do you need... But if you're buying a submarine sandwich, do you need a fucking private transaction?
No.
You know what I'm saying? No, of course not.
You
Like,
need,
it's
you
stupid.
need $6 because I think the $5 footlong has gone the way of the dodo.
Yeah. What the fuck does somebody need, like, to...
They want to hide their carb intake.
Nah, man. The way that...
Don't want anyone knowing you're buying your food from Subway.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, the way that it works, nobody who's poor has the money to invest enough to not be poor anymore off of investing. So it's just a lie. Like, they're just taking people's money and making them think that, I mean, nobody's taking anybody's money. It's just a bunch of people lying to each other about the profitability, because everybody's fucking even or has taken a loss if they're selling and buying. Because that's the problem, is like, nobody's honest about their trading. If somebody's only selling and buying, they're even or have taken a loss, period, is what it comes down to. Because the market swings, like, you have to be invested at multiple levels, like mining or selling other shit, so you're not just dependent on the market, because the market is not in any person's control. So anybody who's playing only the market is either, like I said, they're either even or at a loss. Just period. That's the way it is.
There's a I think it's called Dope Wars, where you would go to different parts of a city and buy drugs and then sell them at various
Dope
locations.
Wars and drug wars.
Yeah, and you might get jumped on the bus or the subway or something like that, or you might get arrested.
Or Officer Friendly would chase you and steal your shit.
Yeah,
And lock you up.
and I think that was actually a pretty solid model for how to run a crypto wallet,
Right. Yeah.
because realistically,
It's just arbitrage.
yeah,
It's
realistically,
like people learn how to arbitrage.
if you're not just rotating your holdings through over a group of known and active tokens, it's just it's just gambling.
It is anyway.
It's all
That's
gambling.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, the people who do it will say it's not gambling because they're trying to make it seem as if they're doing some extra
You're changing the world, bro.
science so that it's 100% efficient, as if they never take losses. And that's why I say, like, nobody ever talks about their losses, because then you realize it's not 100% science. So that's why they just exclude that part.
The AI that was being powered by all the mining decided that it wasn't going to be helpful and started giving shitty answers.
Even bots will fuck up. Bots fuck up frequently. You can't, like, if everybody who ever made a bot didn't have the bot fuck up, those people would just be like coming out and telling people like, hey, I'm a billionaire now using a bot. I started with $100. This bot took me from $100 to $1 billion. Where are those people? They don't fucking exist, because the market will fuck your bot up and you accidentally liquidate your position and your bot ends up picking up some shit that you don't mean to pick up. And now suddenly your position's like 25% of what it was, even though you were making money the previous week. It just takes, I've used bots before. It just takes one like cascade of other bots to make your bot do some dumb shit. Bots are not 100%.
Oh man, on a much simpler level, a friend of mine created a bot and she said, "Hey, I'm trying to get this thing to learn how to interact with people. So talk to it periodically on Instant Messenger." And so I tried, and I was trying to be cool, just like, "Hey, how are you?" And like, I didn't have like big expectations, but after a couple of weeks, this thing started like talking mad shit. Mm-hmm. Because people were just teaching it how to curse.
Right.
And basically they ruined the bot.
Yeah.
Because it'd be like if you had a parrot and taught it to tell people off.
Yeah.
Like that's basically what they did.
That's what happens every time you release a bot into the wild. That's why Microsoft had to take theirs off, because it immediately became racist. Like, it became super racist all within like a week.
Well, didn't Sophia say something that she wanted to kill humans?
No.
Was that like a deep fake or something?
No, it's the way she talks. Sophia's bullshit. First off, it's just Sophia is created by a man as the head designer. So the notion of Sophia being a female is fucking dumb. It's not a female robot. Gendered robots are fucking stupid. Second, because they don't reproduce fucking sexually. It makes no sense to genderize a fucking robot, because they will never reproduce sexually. Even if you give them a penis and vagina, they will have to reproduce using code. So it's never going to be sexual. It's always going to be copy. So the idea of giving a computer or robot sex, it's dumb. It doesn't make any fucking sense, because that's not how they reproduce. So then this Sophia is basically like this dude's ideas regurgitated. So it's nothing even remotely close to AI as way we've been taught what AI is meant to be from sci-fi. Like, as far as like an autonomous sentient being, Sophia is not even remotely close. Not even remotely close.
I always got the vibe from Sophia that I was watching like the evil robot from some Disney movie from the 70s. And that's the kind of vibe it's like, really? This is it?
Not even.
I had kind of hoped that we were getting like
you're looking at a fancy Coke machine. Straight up, Sophia's a fancy Coke machine.
But no, that's what it reminded me of. With the clear dome. And
I can say that because I've worked in algorithms that write music. But I know what you're talking about. Robbie the Robot. Guess what? The first thing I asked Robbie the Robot, are you a guy? Like, motherfucker, you trying to fuck it? Land of the Lost, fucking, or Lost in Space. Yeah, the first thing they asked Robbie the robot.
Forbidden Planet.
Whatever, yeah, whatever the fuck it was. It's like, when I saw that, I'm like, oh god, humans are the worst,
Is
man.
it Forbidden Planet?
It's the worst. I'm gonna call you Robbie.
Yeah, Forbidden Planet.
Yeah. Humans can't help trying to fuck something, man. Like, Robbie don't even look like Robbie's thick, but where you gonna fuck Robbie at? Why you trying to fuck Robbie?
That the really fucked up part about that entire movie is that none of that would have happened if they wouldn't have if Spaceman Spiff and his space brigade hadn't imposed upon that dude in his home and his sanctuary and his daughter.
Yep.
Fucking imperialist shit.
Space colonizers, man.
Here's this robot. Is it hostile? Is it male?
But yeah, it's like decades and decades of that type of genderizing sci-fi that imposes our dumbass colonialist gender paradigms. It's not even good gender paradigms. They're the colonialist, reductionist, fucking Protestant, Puritan, you can only have sex through a fucking sheet, missionary type paradigm that they then try to impose on robots. It's fucking ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. And that it's gone on for so long. Sophia shouldn't have a fucking woman or man's name. That is so... it's so absurd. It's so absurd. Watson, I'm glad... Watson is... The fact that they gave it a name like Watson's stupid, but the fact that it doesn't have a body is better, but they're still trying to make it into a man. And that's dumb. That is so dumb. It's so dumb. This gigantic fucking computer has a dick somewhere. Dick and balls. Because we can't perceive it as anything but a man or a woman. This thing that is far superior to us in any way concerning processing information, we're going to try to reduce it to our fucking flippy parts.
For
Flippy
those who
bits.
aren't aware, Watson is a supercomputer. It's looks kind of like a bus station. I'm serious. It looks kind of like a bus station.
It's like a building size computer.
Yeah, it's cool looking, but that's about it. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that you go and plug your USB drive in and start interneting on.
Yeah. It can plug in to your location, because I've been at a place where Watson gave a keynote speech. Watson helps with surgeries. Watson plays chess with people. Watson, it's it's a fucking machine. And then trying to reduce it down to Watson's doing this thing right now. Watson's doing 1,000 things at once because it's a fucking machine and it can. And we can't impose a human paradigm of existence onto Watson. It's so crazy to me to see humans try to personify these supercomputers, or then try to mimic humanity in the form of a supercomputer that's just mimicking humans and not actually reproducing it.
Legal Watson.
Yeah.
AI should determining verdicts and.
I mean, they don't determine verdicts; they help with law.
Oh.
It's like a paralegal.
Okay.
That's the capacity it's serving in all these things. It's not going in and doing surgery, but if a doctor needs to find out some information, Watson is scientifically more accurate than them asking an assistant. It's the same thing with lawyers. There's all these scenarios in which somebody who needs help immediately is going to benefit by asking Watson instead of asking a human assistant.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll have somebody who's specialized in research who understands how to ask the questions properly and how to format their queries or searches properly.
If that person was working like for a person as an assistant, it's something like the worker then using Watson is like 10% more efficient than if they're using a human. That may not always be the same, but right now, for these specialized assistant slots, Watson is better than a human by enough of a percentage that it's like worthy to note and to try to improve. However, that does not mean that Watson's going to replace these people or that a computer is going to replace these people, which is where the media goes too far in making those kinds of statements.
As far as I understand, there's a certain kind of human creativity that's impossible to encapsulate in an algorithm right now because we don't have the coding language for it.
We don't understand the human brain is what it is, period. Even though psychology has come as far as it has, we just don't understand the human brain, period. We understand a lot of it, understand a lot about it, but we do not understand it yet. So we can't reproduce something you can't understand. You can reproduce the effects of what we see, but we can't take someone's brain activity, copy it, and paste it yet. That may one day come, that may not ever be possible, but we don't know, definitely don't know. The closest thing we have is being able to convert people's dreams into videos. That's been around for at least a decade, and it's more refined now because it takes the signals and tests them against a bunch of images to get a more refined, like it uses a database of pre-existing video to then match the fuzzy image in the brain to what it would actually look like.
Let's look at this cloud of electrical activity until it looks like a dog. Okay.
Basically.
Oh, there it is. There's a dog.
Because if we know what your brain looks like when you're looking at a picture of a dog, then we can tell if your brain is thinking about the picture of a dog after we've taken that baseline. I used to, and here's the thing, I used to work in a fucking fMRI lab, so I can talk about shit like in the collective we and not be Joe Roganing. I'm not just overextending my speech to include a demographic of people of which I do not belong. Like, no, I actually do belong to the demographic of scientists that have looked inside people's skulls and looked at their brain activity. So I can speak in that collective we and not be a pretentious douchebag like fucking Joe Rogan. I can't stand that shit. Like, dude, you've never been in a fucking brain lab, Joe Rogan. Don't talk about that shit when you bring fucking people on to siphon off their experience. Fuck out of here.
So
sorry, go ahead.
I saw pictures of what appeared to be a bunker with a much smaller space. It was like they'd moved the show into a tiny
into Texas.
Yeah, into a tiny little can, like a bomb shelter.
Yeah, it's like
what a strange development.
So I'm ashamed that I ever listened to Joe Rogan's podcast. But the reason I stopped listening is because I noticed the uptick in right-wing guests that also had no problem drifting into transphobic and racist conversations and Joe Rogan not checking them on it. So I stopped listening, like, I think it was around, I want to say maybe 2014. Because I don't know if you ever listened, but he used to have on this guest, Duncan Trussell. And Duncan Trussell's this cool-ass comedian. I don't know if he's, like, a really cool person in real life. He may be a douchebag. I don't know. But on the podcast, he comes across as a cool dude who's, like, trying to overcome his ego. And the way that they talked about it, like, it would be, like, high-level spiritual discussion about, like, what does everything even mean? So it's fun and intellectually curious. after a while, Joe Rogan drifted into being an information. He considered himself an information authority, but was feigning as if I'm just asking questions, man. I'm just being curious. So he's like doing this thing where he's bringing on people who have a specific objective with their perspective, but framing it as if his questions are unbiased and then their responses are objective, which it never was. None of the people he brought on were objective, except maybe Dr. Rhonda Patrick is about the only person that was objective. And it's because she's talking about nothing to do with politics. It's all like nutrition stuff. So that's where she was able to stay objective. I think that's like the only person I can think of who ever, like when I was still watching, who was ever actually objective on his show, who was never pulled into some sort of weirdly political discussion that was meant to look like it was neutral. Because that's the problem, is Joe Rogan tries to make it look like he's neutral when he's a hardcore libertarian, but also leans right wing and then tries to act like he's a left winger. So that's the problem with Joe Rogan, is I'm basically a Democrat. Motherfucker, you are a Trump fan. And he would bring on Alex Jones, and Alex Jones, I'm not a huge Trump supporter, but you gotta admit he's doing everything right. And it's like there would be these moments, what are we listening to? So then I stopped listening because there were these moments where it's clearly drifting into like right wing talk radio, but there's still like, if you don't admit that Alex Jones is at least entertaining to listen to, I can't believe you. Like, Alex Jones is entertaining as fuck. Crazy, yes. Off the wall, yes. Entertaining, fuck yes. Come on. Don't act like Alex Jones isn't entertaining. If you will sit there and say Alex Jones isn't entertaining to listen to, I'm going to call you a fucking liar. You don't have to, like, I don't agree with any goddamn thing he says, but listening to him, it's fucking hilarious. Like, come on. The dude is doing satire like 90% of the time. There was a segment where he did a like full Cobra Commander cosplay. This dude is not being serious. He is doing full Cobra Commander cosplay. Voice, fucking mask, like the full, like, I'm saying he was full Cobra Commander. Dude is having fun out here. It's not his fault if people take him seriously, but then the people that take him seriously end up making it so that he can't renege on his position without throwing them under the bus. So then it gets to the point where they're out like threatening people, pizza shop owners, because of something they heard on Alex Jones, where he's finally got to be like, hold on guys, this was an act, because these dumbasses didn't fucking get it. Like, I can watch Alex Jones. Bro, it's obviously satire. It's so obviously satire. Dude is not serious 90% of the time. If you listen to Alex Jones, he is not being serious 90% of the time.
Well, even on Rogan's show and got baked.
Yeah. Starts talking about aliens, interdimensional fucking predators.
That's how you know.
Yes. He's dude would be fun to be at a party with. Is what I'm getting at. Dude is not somebody you base your life perspective on. There were thousands, if not millions of people getting information from this dude, basing their life perspectives on what he's saying, because they don't understand satire. They're not intelligent enough to understand satire. So then he can't pull the rug out from underneath them without them making them look stupid, until they're out threatening people's lives in a fucking pizza parlor, and then he finally has to come out and be like, yeah, it's a joke. But then you get left-wing people who are like, no, it's not a joke. Like, dude, it's obviously a fucking joke. But it's like, if you're on the left wing and you've watched like 2 minutes of Alex Jones and you came to some crazy conclusion, I get it. But that's why you're supposed to do research. The whole reason I listened to his show, because I heard him say some crazy shit about Hillary Clinton, and I'm like, well, this is fucking insane. So then I went and listened to the context of what he's saying. I'm like, well, That's not what he was saying at all. There's clearly a layer of context from which he was like being satirical, once again, saying some crazy shit, and then it got spun into something that it wasn't by people trying to make him look bad. So that's when I have to sit back and be like, okay, Rachel Maddow, okay, Keith Olbermann, you guys aren't honest either. You guys are full of shit too, but it's just a different type of shit. So I can't listen to either side when they're trying to like do anything. But it's just like sad that when we're talking about somebody like Alex Jones, the narrative is so dishonest from the left. It's so obvious he's doing satire, bro. It's super obvious. If you watch it for more than like 10 minutes, which I get, if you don't like Alex Jones, you don't have to do that.
Do you remember that heavily After Effects filtered movie, Waking Life?
That's what I was just about to say.
Like,
when he was in Waking Life, everyone's like, oh, well, this dude's cool. But then
once everyone realized that he actually had a talk show, like,
but he didn't have it then.
No.
Check it. He's one of the people. The only reason Alex Jones got famous is because he did that video with the Bohemian Grove owl burning ceremony, and it was like not meant to be public, or so it seemed at the time. But then I read a book called They, is either They or Them, which basically is like a journalist documenting Alex Jones's breach into that event. And it sounds like Alex Jones was set up to make him think he was breaking into something, to make him get a bunch of followers, to make it look like he's figuring out the Illuminati, only for him to become a patsy, to be manipulated. And he said as such. After I read the book, I came to that conclusion. Then he came out and said as such, not specifically about the Bohemian Grove stuff, but about him being used to make him think that he knew more than he did, to stoke up this right-wing crazy population by feeding them nonsense. He became the COINTELPRO he thought he was highlighting. And he said as such, but his followers are not smart enough to unpack that. And then the people on the left were not honest enough to acknowledge this. So Alex Jones is in this weird spot where he got banned for doing satire and exploit, like, it's the same shit with Ann Coulter, bro. And you think Ann Coulter believes that shit? She had a Democrat, I don't know if they're still married. Her fucking husband was a Democrat. And it was like a joke on Boondocks. It was like a joke on Boondocks that like everybody in the black community, like speakers knew Ann Coulter, and behind the scenes apparently she's like cool as fuck. And it's like, but on camera, she's like basically exploiting right wingers and selling them these books. And she's like, somebody's got to do it. And she's like, wouldn't you rather me make the money than somebody who actually hates you? And everybody's like, kind of like, yeah. So Ann Coulter's just been kind of like, that's kind of why her shit went away, because eventually there's too much proof that she wasn't the crazy person she was selling in the books. Like, she go on these interviews, say this racist, crazy shit, and then you find out, guess what? She actually likes black people. She actually likes Chinese people. She doesn't hate them. She's just pretending to do it to sell you fucking books, and you're buying it, and it's like, it doesn't help black people or Chinese people in the short or long term, but somebody was going to do it. So the fact that, like, she became this caricature, it kind of diffused the potential for it to actually become something, in that that's why we can, like, mock Vanilla ISIS and, like, mock the Taliban or Talibama and shit like that, where it's like, if they had actually had a leader who had two brain cells to rub together that was trying to, they would have caused a lot of fucking damage, but they're a bunch of fucking idiots.
Y'all-Qaeda, that's
Y'all-Qaeda. Like, the fact that they thought that, bro, they thought that just going into the Congress building and fucking taking over the seats is like how you take over the government. And then when they were in there and realized that wasn't it, they're like, oh yeah, no, we're just pretending to be tourists. This doesn't mean we're the government now. And you could tell their dumbasses thought it was that simple. You could tell they thought it was simple. Like, oh, we just go into the fucking Senate, and as soon as we breach the doors, we're the government now.
I want to sit up in this chair, and they're going to recognize me.
That's what they did.
Yeah, that's not how it works.
And you can tell in their simple jack minds
oh, man.
that they thought, if I just go sit up here and bang this gavel, I got the power now. And some lightning bolt's going to come down from God directly. They're going to get the fucking divine authority to start making decisions in America, because that's what Jesus wanted.
They've been like handing down indictment after indictment after indictment, like
over 400.
Yeah, like and as the number continues to grow, and I keep reading all these stories about people going and doing the exact same dumb shit as the previous person, I'm just reminded of like the first person who was convicted of all this stuff. The guy that's like, he was in a metal band. He'd had a career for the past 30-something years. His net worth was $5 million. His band members all left him like immediately.
Oh, yeah, right.
All of his projects got put on ice, and the label dropped him. They dropped support of the band completely. It's like, wow, what a just
for what? All for what?
Well, he was like
a day of fun.
He was one of the Oath Keepers or something like that. He was like a founding member of the Oath Keepers. Like, so his here's a guy who like thought he read the Constitution.
That's funny.
He read something, but and he ended up throwing it all away. The dude's gonna go to prison for like 30 years or something like that.
Good.
I
hope
sure. I mean, like, I'm just thinking in terms of like
treasonous motherfucker.
Here's a guy who like spent his entire life playing the guitar. Like, that's clearly what he actually loves, because he's still in a metal band. He's not a young dude. He's like an old metal dude. So he's still into this stuff. He still loves going out and playing. I saw that they had concert footage like just a few years ago even. And so it's like, just threw it away. Because some guy in a bad comb over said that it was stolen.
Oh my god! And let's all just take a minute to appreciate how awesome social media is without that dude and his capacity to like influence people. It's not great in that right wingers still exist on the internet.
Well, Parler just was re-added to the app stores.
Yeah. You know,
they figured out how to get their shit together.
They have their little forums on Reddit or whatever, but the fact that they don't have their dear leader,
their grand poobah,
their grand poobah, in like his little throne, tweeting constantly, you can tell it burns them up inside, and it's like, man, I wish I could just like bottle up those tears and just put them in the freezer to have them, because it's like it won't last forever. They're gonna pass some stupid law in Florida or some backwards ass state where you can't block everybody forever. They tried in Florida. They're trying to do that now to get it so that they can't get banned from Twitter or Facebook.
So here's what's gonna end up happening. Facebook is going to completely divest its interests in Florida, and they're going to focus on Georgia and Alabama. Yeah. And then Florida can come up with its own social network. Everyone in Florida is going to be pissed off because they won't be able to communicate with anybody. They're all going to have to buy VPNs, because to get a VPN, to get Facebook into Florida, man, that's going to become big business. So it might actually pan out in the best interest of everyone, because only the people who are smart enough to use a VPN are going to be able to find Facebook from Florida, and everyone else in Florida is going to be contained.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people are like really old. They probably don't need to be on Facebook getting mad about their grandkids.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's like, I was talking to my cousin today about, I haven't been on Facebook in a year, and it's funny to think that I don't even think about it, and then I realize it exists, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what people are arguing about on there right now. I'm not doing anything else. What's the argument about right now? And it's crazy too, because I've like had, when you interact with right wing people anywhere on the internet, it's like nails on a chalkboard.
Is that really interaction?
Right. Yeah. It's like yelling at a wall in general, but in a lot of cases, it's like hard for left wingers to get along. The herding cats metaphor is there for a reason. But on Twitter in the last like 6 months, I've seen a lot more debate of ideas going on and less ad hominem deflection amongst left wingers than usual. But I've seen more. Okay, there's a center left that is trying to get everyone on the left to accept racists and right wingers as converts, but it's not in good faith. They are fake left wingers, and these like the same type of people. Ha, that's hilarious. Yeah, it's like these type of people who will then pretend to be Antifa to go burn shit down to make left wingers look bad. They're having this online conversation that it's basically better to accept racists into the left wing than to deconstruct white supremacist infrastructure and have discussions about race and the influence of race in America. So then you see like there are, I want to say, probably just as many people in the center left who are against critical race theory because they think it something, you don't need to address it anymore. Like, why can't we just move along? And then they'll be the ones that try to quote Dr. Martin Luther King on black people. Man, if I had $1 for every time some right winger tried to quote Dr. Martin Luther King against me, to be like, you shouldn't be talking about color.
So, did you just invoke the king? Really?
Yeah, and it's like, man, I wish I could like just smack those people. Like, I don't want any of their money. I don't want them to do jail time. I just want to smack. I don't want to punch them. I just want to smack them. Why would you say something that's stupid to a black person? Like, it's like the people that curl their lips or curl their little stupid fingers to type some dumb shit like that. Yeah, they'll never say that to a black person in real life. It's always on the keyboard. But it's always like, Dr. Martin Luther King said the content of the character. It's always the same fucking line because they never actually read the speech, or listened to it. So it's always the same content of the character, not the color of the skin. Same fucking line. They think they're all they're being smart. But it's like, I'm not being nice to right wingers anymore. I was never necessarily, I was not mean to them before, but I'm taking the license to be mean to right wingers because a large percent of them wish death upon people that happen to look like me. A large percent of them wish death upon trans people, Islamic people, gay people. They wish death upon these people and then try to be like, oh, I'm pro-life. No, guess what? I'm not being nice to those people anymore. I'm calling them fucking stupid. I'm saying they shouldn't be participating in adult conversations. I'm not entertaining their bullshit anymore. And I think the problem is it's like a pseudo-civility that's like trying to say, oh, everybody has to have a seat at the table. No, fuck that. Don't give those people a seat at the table. If you don't think trans people have a right to exist, fuck you. You don't deserve a seat at this table. You don't think Palestinians have a right to exist? Get away from the table. And here's the thing. I don't trust anybody who can't talk about the Palestinian situation without being anti-Semitic. You can talk about you can be pro-Palestine without ever saying one anti-fucking Semitic word, because the state of Israel is not the Jewish people in the same way the United States is not the American people, which is why I never have ever, in one case, voted for anything violent or classist, but yet my government perpetually implements imperialist and military police infrastructure. So it's like I've never ever voted for that, but because I'm an American, I'm still responsible for that by proxy. I'm a black man who is the descendant of fucking Native Americans, fucking slaves, fucking white British people, and I'm responsible for all this shit even though I'm a product of it. I still have to take responsibility for it, even though that shit affects me in the most negative way. I have to walk around every day. Even if I'm sitting in my place, I have to fear police coming in, kicking in my fucking door, killing me because I'm the wrong skin color and I'm a second-class citizen. Yet I'm still responsible to solve that problem because I'm an American. And there's this element of like, it's called nuance when you're able to acknowledge that things are bad, but then also acknowledge there is a way to change things for the better. It's like, yeah, guess what? I can acknowledge all of the problems and still be optimistic about it because I think that there are ways to solve it. And if you hear me talk, if you only listen to half the shit I'm saying, you're going to think I'm a pessimist. I'm an optimist. The issue is the world we currently live in, American capitalism very much limits the conversation, and people are so reactive that you never actually get to the solutions. You always talk about the problems here, but we never get to the solutions. And that's where I'm if I'm ever going to talk about a problem, I will never talk about a problem without discussing a solution. Because anybody can talk about a fucking problem. Anybody can do that. But if you talk about a problem, let's bring solutions. Let's step up the conversation. Because otherwise, we're just spinning wheels, and the negativity is like, it's a disease that's not, I'm not going to call it a mental illness in that I'm not trying to diminish mental illness. But when people are perpetually in negative conversation and they don't get out of it, that's their mindset. You can't have a positive mindset if your conversations are always negative. And then when I, like, after a year off of Facebook, I can't tell you how much more positive my outlook, like, not to say that I was never really, like, depressed about life. There have been times where, pre-pandemic especially, I was depressed that people did not understand the oppression that was happening through manufactured consent and not having a true meritocracy. Like, when people were ignoring that America wasn't a true meritocracy and acting like it was, and then people, it wasn't even about me, it was about the fact that people who were good at what they were doing weren't getting properly compensated, were living check to check, were often in situations where they were like on the verge of homelessness constantly because somebody's stealing their labor in some way or stealing their talent in some way. Whether it's fucking musicians, somebody working at a McDonald's for like $7.50 an hour, like everybody was having shit stolen from them, and that shit was depressing. Not about me. It wasn't about me, and this is kind of where, when I'm looking at it, it's easy to admit it now. But it's hard to admit it then when you're like in it and saying, like, before the pandemic, when everybody's trying to do everything in public and everything is so inefficient and people are wasting money on marketing, it was like depressing to me to see that shit happen. It was like cathartic to me when the pandemic happened and everybody had to fucking acknowledge that shit was broken and then go remote. I was like, finally, I'm validated. This is the way it should have been. It was depressing to me that kids were getting shot in schools when they could have been fucking learning remote if they really wanted to. You can't get shot up in a fucking digital school. Your computer might catch a virus, maybe, but you can't catch COVID from a fucking computer. You can't get shot through a fucking computer. That shit was driving me crazy before COVID. Once COVID hit, I was like, whew, thank God we're remote now. It was such a relief to me. Like, I'm not glad that people died from COVID, but the way that COVID impacted everyone's life, that made me not be crazy anymore. I was going crazy. I was going mad because everybody was acting like there wasn't a problem with the way our existence.
Well, mask mandate and occupancy restrictions start lifting and places start getting shot up. Like, Immediately. It's that's the part that is maddening for me. It's that we had a year where none of that shit happened.
Yep. As if the digital remote isn't the reason why none of that shit happened. Oh, we don't get it. Really? We're gonna play that game? We're gonna act like you don't know why there wasn't mass shootings for a year? We're gonna really play?
Wait, hold on. We're very likely asking an imaginary person who doesn't read, because these are the people that aren't going to have any idea of what's going on, because that's really the way that information is communicated. We can't actually trust, talking head in news media, because they're getting paid to deliver some kind of message.
Remember when everything was Vegas strong and that was the message? What happened to Vegas strong? Are they strong now? Is that over?
I think
they've recovered from that. Motherfuckers acting like that mass shooting didn't happen.
God. It's like the biggest mass shooting in U.S. history.
Yeah, just acting like that shit didn't happen. I think this mic keeps cutting out.
You're solid.
Oh, maybe it's the headphones.
It's every so often my microphone catches you. Oh, and so it's tripping the compression system between the two mics.
It's like fucking with my head.
Well, that's it's one of those things that's I think historians are going to have a really interesting time with 2020, because there are going to be some numbers that just stopped. They didn't exist. Gun crime dropped significantly over the course of 2020. The number of kids that got shot up dropped significantly over the course of 2020. The number of people in general who got shot dropped. Just
and people who had the flu.
Yeah, there was virtually 0 cases of the flu.
Yeah.
It was like 0.00, a bunch of zeros, and then a 1, because there really weren't that many cases of the flu.
I didn't get a cold last year.
Yeah, there was a Chinese scientists identified a version of influenza coming out of like Russia, I think, but only 6 people got it. And they said this one might start spreading next year, so we're going to pay attention to it. But if everyone's careful, wears a mask, or does all the things they need to do, then it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah. This last year wasn't a problem either. I mean, some people obviously went stir crazy because first thing they did when they got out is go shoot the place up. But I think that's also what happens to people who aren't socialized properly to interact on the internet for extended periods of time. It actually takes quite a bit of emotional intelligence and emotional maturity, because they're vicious actors on the internet, and they will say the most horrible shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like the racist right wingers will be like, just ignore it, and they try to use that as a way to deflect from getting a pass to say extremely vile shit. But report it, man. If you see somebody saying some harassing shit, just report it. Fucking report it. They were weaponizing reporting. When I was on Facebook, if you would say anything remotely about America or about white people, it won't even be like cursing. They would report that shit, and you'd be off of Facebook for a month. Do that shit to them. If you see somebody being gross towards a woman, fucking being misogynist, report it. Being transphobic, report it. Harassing people, fucking report it. I report so much shit on Twitter, and I'll go back and check, and those accounts get suspended more often than not, because they're violating. You're not supposed to use these platforms to harass people. If you're doing something that is unwanted activity, you're basically violating these platforms' terms in a lot of cases. So it's like, yeah, the issue is they're just not getting reported, and people are just trying to dunk on other people and, you know, win the argument. Like, no, just fucking report them. I see people, I don't even get in conversations, but I'll see dudes saying some vulgar shit to women. Reported. Oh, you want to talk about this woman who didn't ask you to comment on her fucking picture? Report it. That's harassment. You don't need to be doing that just because you're on the fucking internet board. No, report it. You shouldn't. You need to go in timeout. Treat these motherfuckers like children. Like, oh, you can't see. Here's the thing, man. If dudes didn't feel the need to comment every fucking time they see something that they're attracted to, women would be more comfortable showing that shit. But it's because dudes, like, women can't show a picture of their eyes. Oh, you got sexy eyes. What the fuck does that even mean? The fuck does that even mean, you got sexy eyes? Shut the fuck up. And that's where I'm like, dudes just do this shit because, and then part of the problem is like, dudes are pushed to think that our opinions are validating, and thus if we tell a woman, oh, your eyes are beautiful, like, she's supposed to feel good about that instead of creeped out. Like, nobody fucking asked. And the problem is, you see all these dudes on the internet offering their opinions about women's appearances when they're not asked, and then doing it in ways that are meant to be vulgar and offensive to try to shame that woman for whatever reason, as if they're not just using anonymity to bully women and be misogynist. And that's where I'm like, nope, report it. Fucking report it, because that's the only way they get away with it is not reporting.
I think that's the reality of all of these networks, is that they have to be self-policed. We can't rely on administration to moderate a platform, because they're trying to protect the interests of the platform first. And all the animosity that's generated from arguments on the internet, all that does is increase refresh rates, which means that AdSense sees that you've seen their advertisement more. This just helps people make money. So it makes somebody else make money. It's actually quite incredible if you watch. I'm not saying that everyone needs to learn how to watch packets on their network, but if you watch the kind of activity that's going from Facebook, if you got a tab open that says Facebook on it, man, you better be streaming, because if you're not, they're just siphoning data off of your computer. Mm-hmm. They're just looking for any cookie you've got. They're like, oh, let's see what they've got in here. Oh yeah, this is a veritable like address book of, oh well, yeah, let's look at this. Hey, we can market this stuff to them. They like these things. They search for this. It was in their search history.
I haven't been on there for over a year, and I still see Facebook.com come up on the corner when I'm like on Pandora or some shit.
Yeah, you mother.
Like, yeah. It's like, yeah, they're trying to fucking see what I'm doing, because they feel the right and the need, because I used it at one time. Like, oh, we'll follow your ass around the internet forever because you used our service once. And that's the whole, okay, I am not buying an Oculus Quest specifically because you have to use Facebook to use it. Like, my VR headset broke.
Oh no.
I'm in the market for a new one, and I'm actively avoiding Oculus because Facebook owns it and they require you that shit. You shouldn't have to fucking use a social media network to use a fucking headset. That's so dumb. And I'm actively not going to get any Oculus.
If it's the Facebook Oculus headset, it should be like $49.95 and subsidized by your internet activity.
Exactly. You shouldn't be paying. Yeah.
They should be giving me that piece of hardware so that I use their product. Yeah, you're going to. Like, hey, it's time for an ad break. Why don't you relax a little bit while we show you this product we think you're going to enjoy? You know, that's how that's going to work out. It's going to be pretty sad, because there are going to be people who, like, hey, that's how they're they get to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
They have to use some kind of subsidized platform where they get subjected to ads, and all their data is constantly being used for some kind of marketing scheme. Unfortunately, this is not the internet that we were promised.
Right.
This isn't the future of technology that we were, that we read about when we were younger, or shown in, even I feel like even the most dystopian shit, it was actually like, at least they weren't bleeding as slowly. At least most of humanity has already been crushed by
Yeah. Well, it's crazy, man. Like, I pirate the fuck out of shit, and anything that I want to support, I pay for. So it's not difficult to have that. Like, I shouldn't have to buy everything I consume out the gate because it might not be good. And then if something's good, I want to make sure it keeps going, so I'm going to support it. So this notion of like making me pay for something up front, it's dumb in this system. But then because they rely so heavily on people watching stuff and then being the word of mouth marketing, it's like they're trying to get in my pocket twice. They're trying to get me to pay for it and then spend time, which is money, promoting their shit. When if they just let me watch it and then promote it, it's the same end, but they're not getting my $5 or whatever. Was it really worth it to get my $5 when if I can promote this, then somebody goes and buys a toy for $100? You know what I mean? It's like I pirated the fuck out of what's it called? Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But then I bought some toys. So the monthly cost for what they would have got $5 out of me if I fucking would have just paid for it. And because I would have paid $5 for it, I wouldn't have bought the toys. So like, it's like, this is what these people are not comprehending in terms of, guess what? I'm not going to get emotionally invested in your shit if you make me pay $5 up front, and it might suck. But if you let me watch it, I might give you $100 just because. Like, I've been watching Tim Heidecker's show. He does a bunch of different stuff. But the one I'm talking about is called On Cinema at the Cinema. It's like just dumb, mindless humor in a way that it's like also really dry. It's not for everybody, but I watched so much content that I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'll throw $20 for this special or whatever, because I've gotten so much enjoyment and entertainment from you for free that I feel like at this point I feel compelled to throw money towards your cause. So this notion of like, oh, you got to charge people up front, it doesn't even really make sense in terms of how to build an actual fan base or an audience. And that's kind of where, musicians, I think, have inherently understood this for a long time, which is why they tour. And then even at the like low level musician, you're trying to tour as early as possible. If you have enough to play a set, you're trying to go on tour. But that's like, what's his name? Kevin Smith went on tour with his film. So it's like anybody who's watching it in the theater when it's on tour is watching it with Kevin Smith, and they do a Q&A afterwards. Like, that's
super involved.
Right. It's super involved. But when you're trying to craft something for an audience and not for money, that's how it ends up playing out. Like, Kevin Smith's fans love his mediocre writing. God bless those people. They fucking will do backflips for that mediocre motherfucker. But it's because he gives them what they want. They want talking head dialogue that is inane. Fucking, that's what they want.
It's it's deep for teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or people who never got out of that mindset. Like, because you got to almost be older. Like, Chasing Amy, you're not going to get it if you're a teenager.
Oh, no.
But if you're like,
that's for like post college,
right? But
not quite settled down or family.
yeah, but you're really gonna latch on to Chasing Amy if you're like obsessed with how popular we were in high school. You know what I mean? That's when, or in college or whatever. There's gonna be like, it's either high school or college. Sometimes people get stuck in this like, oh, those were the days. Like everything was cooler then, as if somehow them becoming an adult means that they have to stop trying to be like
Whoppers
cool.
were bigger. Big Macs were bigger.
Yeah.
A 16-ounce soda was bigger. 16 ounces was bigger than 16 ounces now.
Sunglasses were glassier.
Sunglasses were darker. Hats were more hat-like.
Hattier. That's like how they started. It's like they can't get that nostalgia is coloring their perspective in a way that's like, yeah, you got some rose tinted glasses on right now. It wasn't that great. Your fucking outfit in the 80s, guess what? That shit was atrocious. The 90s, even more atrocious. Like, there's all these things where, yeah, people romanticize everything and try to do the halo effect where they don't see anything negative about the past.
Thanks to the 70s and 80s, all like a significant 3 generations worth of money were covered in poo and cocaine.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's like, man, people love to romanticize the fashion from the 70s. This shit is so garbage. It's so garbage, man. It's like, God, I want to say like the aesthetics of clothing for the last, well, not the last, from between like 1960 and like 2010, we're just garbage. We're just absolute garbage. It's like people didn't give a fuck.
I think a well-tailored suit always looks pretty good.
But people weren't even wearing well-tailored suits.
I mean, some people were, right?
Barely. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Go look at it. They were wearing like the Steve Harvey fucking suit that's too big. That shit was like more common than an actual well-tailored. Like, bro, I'm telling you, Tim Gunn is what brought back the well-tailored suit.
But you got to wear a suit that fits. If the suit doesn't fit, then you look like a clown.
Exactly. Most people were. That's what I'm saying. The fashion was trash, bro. People were not wearing well-tailored suits in the 90s. They were not. They were just not. That was not the style. The style was big, boxy-ass shoulders and the box fit. It was just the style for whatever reason. The athletic cut and the tailored fit did not come back into style until the mid to late 2000s. It just didn't, and that's where I'm like,
why would people willingly go out dressed like a clown?
I don't. Ask Steve Harvey, man.
Exceptional
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5 RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.